There's been something in the news this morning about the nature of getting a suntan, sunlight, and such like. Now, one of the key things that happens is that when we are exposed to sunlight, something called cholesterol sulfate, which is a type of cholesterol that exists within sort of our skin, converts that sunlight into vitamin D. Vitamin D does not come from sunlight, it is manufactured by the body when the cholesterol is exposed to sunlight. And this is something that's worth remembering. So when we go on silly low cholesterol diets, even though that most of our cholesterol is manufactured by the body, our body does require cholesterol in quite large quantities for various reasons. And it is interesting that with our obsession with low saturated fat diets and low cholesterol diets, that for whatever reason we are now certainly in England, we are supposedly chronically deficient in vitamin D. Could there be a link with regards to, because our diets are insane in the sense that we are on low cholesterol diets and low saturated fat diets? Saturated fat and cholesterol are a requirement for our brain. There are an awful lot of brain diseases about. If you think about Parkinson's and Alzheimer's and such like, dementia, it's a fast-growing problem. Has any connection with our attitude towards saturated fat and cholesterol, I wonder? Is it to do with the fact that we're staying more and more inside rather than exposing ourselves to good quality sunlight? Man has managed to exist for many hundreds of thousands of years exposed to this big ball of gas in the sky called the sun, and strangely sort of skin cancer is a relatively recent problem. Is it just simply a case of extremes in the same way as is it the diet that we're consuming is a problem, or is it just simply the quantities of food we're consuming? If we take, say, the Eskimos in Alaska, or say the Masai Mara in Kenya, they live in totally different worlds. One is extremely cold and one is extremely hot. In terms of their physiology, technically we look at them, we tend to think of them as being quite fat. And in the case of the Eskimos, we have the Kenyans that are generally very thin. However, what's interesting about them is that they are exposed to very bright lights. In terms of, you have the winter sun, so they're very tanned. In the case of the Eskimos, even they are covered up a lot of the time. And you also have, in Kenya, you have an awful lot of sun because they're in the middle of Africa. However, skin cancer is extremely low, and also in the case of the Eskimos, they have the highest saturated fat consumption in the world, and yet they don't get heart disease. And in the case of the Kenyans, they have the highest cholesterol consumption in the world, and lo and behold, they don't get heart disease. So there are a variety of questions I ask with regards to health and sunlight and fat and cholesterol. Is that why are we told continuously that these natural things, these things that are part of who we are, part of the human race, why is it that we are told consistently that they are bad for us? It's nonsense. It has to be nonsense. Just common sense says it's nonsense. Is that your body actually manufactures an awful lot of cholesterol, so about 80% of your cholesterol is actually manufactured by your liver, and the other 20% is what you eat. So these are things to consider, that in the natural world, cholesterol keeps us alive. It's a prerequisite. As is saturated fat. All this stuff about omega-3, we have to remember that omega-3 can't be stored by the body unless it's in the presence of saturated fat. So it's all very nice going on a nice fishy diet with omega-3s, and in fact omega-3 is not exclusive to fish at all. Any good wild, good quality meat, such as, say, venison and lamb, actually has very high content of omega-3. Omega-3 is actually something to do with lack of stress in a strange and weird kind of way. Another of those things that is helpful when it's exposed to sunlight again, vitamin D, all these other things, they help the quality of life of an individual. This applies to animals as well as humans. So if you're exposed to good old sunlight, you tend to feel well in terms of we feel good. And this is to do with 3 amino acids. And that is tryptophan, phenylalanine and tyrosine, and they in essence convert the ultraviolet light into mood, if you like. So all these things, when we talk about sunlight as being somehow the enemy, it is stark raving potty. Our whole system is filled with photoreceptors, as this includes even within our intestines we have photoreceptors. That means things that are sensitive to light, and to say that somehow sunlight is our enemy is stark raving potty, in my opinion. And research also backs it up as well. It's not just me that thinks this. So next time you hear a bit of news that says somehow any kind of tan is somehow bad for you, well, there is actually very low instances of skin cancer in very sunny places. The exception to the rule is Australia. But then again, maybe it's to do with its Western lifestyle in Australia. Is it more to do with sun worship? I think I'm making generalisation here, but I suspect that no African in their right mind wants to sun worship in the middle of the day. Generally speaking, they do an awful lot of work as the sun's ramping up, and between the hours of sort of 11 and 2, you tend to stay in the shade. Maybe it's to do with just common sense rather than that the sun is bad. Your body is not meant to get burnt. So I would say that sunlight, vitamin D and cholesterol are your best friends.